Gentlemen, boys and girls around the world, the show has started. That's
And
a
away
new
we
one,
go.
Randy. By the way,
I
you wearing a short sleeve shirt or long sleeve?
Nah, man, long sleeve. Long sleeve. Yeah.
It's 50 degrees out there, Randy.
Well, I had to put a little sunscreen on. It's pretty bright outside, so keep the old head in the game here. But Teddy, I've got my notes. So old school is ready for action today.
I'm good. I appreciate that you put all that prep work in to be able to pull this show off. So, hey, everybody, it's 12 o'clock. This is Teddy Burriss, my good friend Randy Wooden. You're at Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, and our special guest today is I hope I can say Ms. Tracy Winter. And we'll get to who she is in a minute and introduce you to what she's all about. But my company is Burriss Consulting. We're social media strategists. We're focused on this thing called LinkedIn, teaching people how to use LinkedIn as a business tool. And I have the time of my life doing that. Randy, would you introduce yourself to the good people, please?
Sure. Let me get my notes. Hang on. Randy Wooden. I work for Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, based out of Winston-Salem area. And I run our professional center. They hired me back in 2012 to start the program, and we believe it's still the only solely Goodwill funded professional center across the country. So as you might imagine, we work with folks that very much like the ones on the call today that we'll have that are professional, however you want to define that. And Tracy, half our audience will be job seeker folks, and half our audience typically will be professionals who just are groupies and fans of Teddy Burriss. And let me just tell you, there are a lot of them. I wish I had his following, but I don't. But maybe one day I'll get there. So
Randy, it's a double-edged sword, buddy. The security staff I have cost me an arm and a leg in beer.
Oh my. Well, I aspire to be you, my friend, one of these days. You know what? I'll tell you. Over my years in business, and also I used to work in radio, and so I've met a lot of folks, and a lot of different personalities are out there, to include those that are more out there, more gregarious, more willing and able to communicate. But there are so many people that is just like pulling teeth, is that communication and dealing with groups and effectively communicating. So I'm really excited for today's show. So Teddy, let me throw it back to you, and we'll get this thing started.
So, hey, folks, we're really happy. I'm really excited. Let me make sure I spell Tracy's name right when I'm speaking to you about Tracy. She's an executive and a leadership coach. And what she specializes in is people who are brighter than the average bear. And Randy, I think that is 98% of our audience. It might even include you, buddy.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So what Tracy does is she helps her clients. She helps the people that she serves to improve their soft skills, their communication skills, so they can be more successful at work and in life. Now, Tracy, what's the word I want to say? She identifies herself as a nerd. And because she understands better the struggles that many people have to overcome in order to be successful in life and career. Tracy, would you help me out and introduce yourself better and a little bit more to the audience?
Well, that was a terrific introduction, but I'll try to add a little bit more. I am an executive and leadership coach. My background is in organizational development and human development. And I've got a PhD in human development, which helps me understand, the developmental pieces that go into this, which people don't always consider. And I study people who are brighter than the average bear, particularly their social emotional development. So that's why I am passionate about this particular thing and this particular population. I've seen the challenges. I've seen it with my friends and my family. I've seen it with coworkers and in careers, and it's a thing that can be learned. It's not something you have to continue to struggle with and be blocked by.
Yeah, cool. Hey,
Real
I
good.
forgot the housekeeping stuff, dude.
Yeah. I was going to keep an eye on the chat box today. So if you are in attendance and you have a question for Tracy or maybe a comment, I'll monitor the chat box. Don't put it in the Q&A because, again, I like to focus on one thing, and it's my show, so I'm going to do it. How about that? But so yeah, if you do have, We always like to know where you're watching us from. So if you are so inclined, let us know what city or state or country that you're watching us from. We're happy to share that. So, all right, I think
the
that's
person
it.
that drove the furthest to get here gets a prize.
How much is in the prize box this week, Teddy?
It's a secret.
All right, we'll get to it.
All right, move on.
Let's
Tracy,
do it.
you know, I also identify with that term nerd based on my definition and how I perceive what a nerd is. Help us so that we, put this in context. What is the definition of nerd in the context of how you help people?
Well, look, it's the brighter than the average bear is sort of the basis of it. It's often people who have a hard time connecting because of their intelligence or because they don't think the same way as other people. But really, I let nerd be defined by your like each person. If they feel like they're a nerd, if they feel like they're out of place, if they feel like they have a hard time connecting, then chances are they're a nerd, or at least something I've got might be able to help them. So it's more of a broad category in terms of, we all feel out of place at times. And so maybe sometimes you're a nerd and sometimes you're not. But we can all use these.
Let me just check. So if I added more horsepower to my smartphone and made it a super smartphone, am I a nerd?
Depends on which phone we're talking about. I mean, technically, yes, I would imagine. If you are, bright enough to be able to take your phone and manipulate it and make it into something even more amazing, then yes, you'd probably be a nerd. I'm not sure when we're starting with a flip phone, if that really can happen. But I don't want to be, I don't want to leave anybody out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I like that definition. It's how you think about yourself. Do I feel like I'm in the right place? Am I hanging out with the right people? And am I able to communicate with these people in a way that's meaningful to them? And that's a lot. There's a lot that plays into that. It's not just one answer. So thank you for helping us with that. So let's talk about that a little bit more then. Take that a little further. What makes communicating as a nerd, what makes it difficult? What makes it hard for them?
Well, a lot of the same principles apply, right? It's just that it seems like some people can do that, like breathing, communicate and connect with people. My sister is one of those. She makes everybody feel seen and heard and just does it like she breathes. But as a nerd, you're often not quite as able to connect as easily. And there's some reasons for that. A lot of people who identify as nerds are also very highly sensitive. Sometimes they're so highly sensitive, they shut it down and can look like, pure logic, because allowing that in is so hard, and they even hide it from themselves. There's also, and this was what I've studied, is a lot of people have experienced rejection in the past for the things they've said or the way they've presented themselves or that kind of thing. The things that we all need to do day to day. But sometimes when you show your authentic self, you get a reflection that isn't quite supportive of that self. And so those kinds of things, especially combined with the highly sensitivity, you put that together and you've got some hurt, you've got some harm, and you've got some scar tissue that can be hard to make yourself want to go back out there and try again.
Which is often the magic to getting better.
Absolutely.
Go out and try again.
It's psychiatry, in a psychiatry, freshman psychiatry firm, they asked, what would you like to have? And you can't have a phobia because that's easily cured. You just do the thing. So like this, the more you do it, the more you practice it, the more you're going to be okay with it. And you'll learn how to navigate these waters.
Yeah, buddy?
I just wonder about how we self-define ourselves as a nerd. Is there a point in our life, or are we just told, hey, you're a nerd, and we start to believe it? Or is that an innate kind of a thing that we sense, and it sort of is a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing, where we just kind of, I'm okay with being a nerd, so what's it to you? That kind of thing.
I mean, it can be any of the above, right? I mean, some of that scar tissue can come from being bullied, being called names. And so people who were called nerds, in their childhood, sometimes reclaim that as, yep, I'm a nerd. You don't have to be like, what's it to you, to claim that for yourself either, right? You can
Get
just
off my
do it
lawn.
calmly and smoothly. But I do think it's a state of mind or a state of being. I think that there's a large population that I study that they feel that out of placeness. They feel that they are not on the same wavelength as other people. They're just operating on a different one. And so bridging that distance is hard. So it's both. It can be that you've called it and you're reclaiming that term. It can be something that puts you off, in which case I do apologize for triggering. But it also can be just, I feel like I don't belong. How do I get there? How do I make that bridge to whatever it is that I'm trying to participate in?
Yeah. And that self-identification, ignore the external identification, that self-identification of being a nerd can be in lots of different styles of people, lots of different work environments, lots of different roles. I'm picturing, I often refer to myself as an English major. Sometimes I refer to myself as a math major. Sometimes I refer to myself as a technology guru, a little bit beyond the flip phone. And in any one of those instances for myself, when I'm in that mindset of being a, wordsmith, then that can be a little nerdy, because Teddy, you really got to be that particular about the words. If I'm in the space of math and, trying to figure something out mathematically, and people go, well, my daughters are one of those, so Dad, why do you need to make it that finite? So there's lots of different roles and lots of different environments where someone may self-identify as a nerd. And I'll tell you that, and often for me, I celebrate people who may identify as nerds. I mean, they're freaking smart people, and they think differently than others, and we can learn from those. So, and then the challenge is, how do we help them, and how do they help themselves to communicate better? So, let's go another step. By the way, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, because Randy is not paying attention to Q&A for the job seekers out now. See, I just forced you to look.
Teddy, I'm one step ahead of you. All right. So Dean has a question. Let's he put it in the Q&A. So shame on you, Dean. You know better than that. Can you make a positive spin? Can you put a positive spin on being a nerd?
Oh, absolutely.
They run a lot of high-tech companies. Is there a difference between a nerd and a geek?
I have had this discussion with my brother-in-law, who is a professional computer genius, i.e. he does something computery that I can't understand enough to explain to somebody. So I believe he has told me that a geek is someone who's very smart. No. A geek is someone who's very smart with social skills, and a nerd is someone who's very smart without social skills. But I get them mixed up sometimes. As far as putting a positive spin on it, absolutely. Like Teddy just said, people who identify as nerds, people who feel a little out of place, it's often because they think differently. And because they think differently, they have ideas that nobody else would have come up with. Mm-hmm. And they connect things that other people haven't connected. And they just, when you get them ideating, you can watch their eyes light up and just keep rolling. And so many interesting things come out of it. So like, nerds are my people. That's like the reason I'm interested in nerds. The reason I became a nerd coach is because everybody I know, from the honors college, back in college, all the way through, they're nerds, and they're fascinating and they're wonderful people. They're also, I wouldn't say this across the board because you can't, but the high sensitivity part, if that applies to you, that can also make you very kind to other people, because you understand what it can do to, say that comment that leaves that scar tissue. So there's a lot of wonderful things about being a nerd. I mean, it's nerds that are going to cure cancer. It's nerds that are going to figure out world peace. So yeah, go nerds.
And nerds are going to fly me to Mars one day.
There you go. Absolutely. You think Elon Musk isn't a nerd?
Good stuff. Hey, let's go a little deeper then, where I was heading. So as a job seeker who might feel as if they're nerdy or a geek, and often they may feel a little bit out of place, how do they introduce themselves, and how do they start a conversation with someone that can be enjoyable and rewarding without being daunting?
So one of the places we get tripped up, especially talking to new people, a lot of nerds are introverts. Not everybody, but a lot of nerds are introverts. So that makes it not their natural thing to want to, push themselves out into the world. So there's that extra little bit for them. The way that you can do that is to feed your curiosity. So a lot of nerds want to know new things. They're always looking for information. They're looking for new input, and people are a source of input. People are a source of information. So if you get curious about that person you're talking to, right? Maybe they've been a speaker at a conference, or well, now it's all webinars, right? So maybe they've been a speaker at a webinar and they say something that is just hooks your brain. Go talk to them about it. Go ask them about it. If they're talking about it, then they're excited about it and they'll be happy to talk about it with you. But ask questions. And we get tripped up being stuck in our heads of, oh gosh, what do I say next? Do they like me? Is this going to be okay? And I can't tell you to put those aside. That's not that easy. But I will tell you that when you're thinking about the other, there's less room to think about yourself, and there's less room to get tied up in that. So as you're thinking about the other and staying curious and asking questions, that's where the sweet spot's going to be, because you as a nerd are getting that information, you're feeding your curiosity, and the other person, they love talking about themselves, honestly. We all love talking about ourselves. Get them talking about themselves, especially a topic that they're really passionate about and excited about, like I'm running at the mouth right now about this, then they're going to keep going. They're going to think that you are fascinating because you're interested in the thing that they care about.
Yeah. Randy?
Yeah, we had a comment in the chat box. It was in the chat box, so it counts. But the subject of Myers-Briggs assessment and what factor that might play in your consulting work.
So I love the Myers-Briggs. I find it to be a really useful framework. I go back a little bit further into it and use sort of the Jungian type, so I don't depend necessarily on the instrument that has had some validation problems, and we can have that discussion another day. But a lot of nerds are introverts, like we talked about, right? So they get their energy from being in their inner world. Mm-hmm. And this is asking them to go into their outer world. So one thing I always advise people is be aware this is going to suck some energy from you. Get a good night's sleep. Teddy asked me before we started here, did you get a good night's sleep? And I absolutely did, because I'm an introvert. And I'm going to go like,
show. Tracy,
pardon me?
We've kicked people off the show who did not get a good night's sleep.
I think that's pretty valid. Give them a chance to get a good night's sleep and come back another day, and then they'll be on their toes, right? Yeah, so I'm going to get off of this and I'm going to be pooped, but I have planned that into my day. I have recovery time planned into my day. I had quiet time before this to really consider and reflect on what we were going to talk about today. And I know as an introvert, I need to plan those times in. I can't expect myself to jump into another meeting. So that's one thing, is plan for it. Another place I see it is that 77% of the country prefers sensing in the Myers-Briggs, which is the concrete, give me step-by-step, explain it to me in words that I can add 1 + 2 + 3 to get to 4. People who prefer intuition, which is a lot of nerds, it's a lot of people that fall into that category, even though it's only 23%, 27% of the population, 73 and 27. They use intuition. So they're looking at big pictures and patterns, and they're seeing the 4 before they see how it adds up. They see the 4 and they can go, well, it could be 1 and 3, or it could be 1 and 2 and 3 doesn't make 4. That makes.
Yeah, I was going to challenge you on that one, Tracy.
I was a media major, so I'm with you. Just keep on going.
Social scientist. That's always my excuse. Social scientist. So they're going to see that big picture, and someone who prefers sensing, which is again 73% of the population, can't understand that overview if you haven't given them the steps yet. So there's a real communication divide that can happen there. And then the thinking and feeling divide is up there too. If someone prefers feeling and you're a person who prefers thinking, you're going to give logical reasons for everything, and they're not going to land. If you know they prefer feeling, you can give reasons that are associated with harmony and value and affirmation for the same thing, and the other person will hear you. So there's a translation exercise, and that's how I use the Myers-Briggs, is thinking of it as a translation for nerds who can grok that system.
Yeah, I'm with you. We have to understand ourselves. We have to do these assessments to understand ourselves, and then most importantly, once we understand ourselves, we have to figure out, well, how do I need to adjust based on who I really am? And by the way, one of the things, I'm a little bit extroverted. I was waiting for Randy to go a little bit.
A little. Well, Teddy, I'm trying to do my job over here. So, yeah,
Oh,
I'm
excuse me.
checking the Q&A because,
Hit the mute button if you need to, buddy.
yeah, it's right there, man. So let me hit.
So, so as a little bit of an extrovert, Tracy, I have to remind myself to shut up. So
Yeah.
it's what I've learned about me. So
If you want to know what an extrovert thinks, just listen. If you want to know what an introvert thinks, ask.
There you go. Hey, I've got a question, and this is going to be something that may we may want to delve into even more as the show goes on. Again, we've got half of the 30,000+ viewers, roughly half of them are job hunters. And roughly half of them are not job hunters, but they're, like I said, they're groupie friends of Teddy and the Teddy Burriss fan club. So if I'm a job hunter, interviewing is not my bag. It's almost like a first date. I'm nervous. I've got a whole litany of things running through my head, most of which are probably self-talk negative. I just wish I could start work and not have to go through the charade of impressing people and all this stuff. Let me just get to work. So for those people, the people that are in the job hunt that have that sense, hey, I'm a little bit of a nerd here. What are some tips, some reassurance? What are some things you can share with them that might help them work through those barriers?
So the first thing I'm going to say is evidence. When you have that self-talk, you can even write them down as that voice in your head, says them to you. See what it's saying, and then look for evidence. Is that thought true, or is that not true? Are you really somebody who's totally stupid and can't interview and can't talk to people, or is there evidence that you can and that you have and that you've been successful in this before? So it's kind of a little CBT trick in some ways, cognitive behavioral therapy, but providing the evidence, especially for people who come from a logic standpoint. If there's evidence, you have to accept that as sort of the science of it. The other thing I would say, and this is not going to be a popular answer, but is practice. Just practice, right? Get a friend, get a job coach, get on a webinar where they do this. There's lots of places where you can practice being interviewed. Write down your answers, get them in your head. As introverts, a lot of times we will run a conversation in our head before it happens. And, to try to expect, well, what if it goes this way? What if it goes this way? What if it goes this way? Because we're going to prepare. We're not as good on our feet. And so write it out, practice it. Have your friend ask you some questions. Go online. There's tons of things that have, popular interview questions, and practice. It's just like we were talking about, the phobia thing earlier. The way that you get over being scared of the thing is by doing the thing. So do it.
Randy, I told you, we keep bringing smart people to the show, man.
We do. We've had some comments too. Somebody brought up Toastmasters as a way for you to try to get those butterflies out and have people in a safe environment critique you. So that might be of help. Is that, Teddy, I see you nodding your head. You
Toastmasters, I can testify as a member of Toastmasters. I've watched a guy come in who was scared to death to meet people. And 10 years later, he's still in that club. He's now the president of that club. So it works.
It does. And also another comment, the phrase social anxiety was brought up, and I'm not a clinician, so I'm not even going to try to define that, but could you define that, and how does that mesh with our discussion today?
So I'm not a clinician either. So you'll have to take my word as the social scientist I am, not clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. So social anxiety is when you get worried about interacting with people. That's really what we're talking about today, right? Is what happens when the butterflies get so, going in my stomach that it affects my tongue and I can't get the words out, or I don't pick the right words, or I don't, recognize what's going on in the situation because I'm so in my head, and that's the social anxiety will spin circles in your brain. If you talk to somebody who's had that in a serious way, that's what they will also describe as just like this perseveration, right? And what's going on is it's telling you, you're not going to be okay. You're not going to be okay. It's your sympathetic nervous system turning on. So there's some really basic biological ways to deal with this when it starts revving up that much. You need to breathe. And by breathe, I mean 4 or 5 counts in, 4 or 5 counts out. Do it to a clock. Practice it before it's going to come up, before it happens. Practice it multiple times a day. By regulating your breathing, it biologically turns your parasympathetic nervous system back on and gets you back into your upper brain, where you can act without panic, right? And you can make choices in a thoughtful and kind of the way you want to, from your best self. So that's one thing to do with social anxiety. The other thing is social anxiety is in part, in terms of behaviorally, sometimes there are some neurotransmitters that are out of whack, and there's medication that can help with that. Talk to your psychiatrist. But behaviorally, it's again kind of a phobia. Practice. Do it. Find a safe space, find a little less safe space, find a little less safe space. Keep practicing, keep going out there.
I just finished reading a book end of the year called Breathe. And then I chose breathe as my word of the year for 2021 because of what I learned, how if we manage our breath, we manage the pace of our breath, the amount of air we take in, and lots of other things related to breathing, it really can have a powerful impact on our psyche. That's this thing in the gray matter here, as well as our health. Yeah, big stuff. Good stuff. All right, Trace, let's go to this up. So we started a conversation. We've been introduced. I've introduced my buddy Randy to you, and he's not really comfortable having a conversation. So what's a good way for Randy to go, oh my God, Teddy just introduced me to this lady. She's really smart. I don't know what to do. How can you help him take it from an introduction to a conversation?
So unfortunately, I've already used some of this material, so I'm going to sound a little repetitive.
That's fine.
But it's the things that I said about keeping a conversation going, right? It's also how you enter into a conversation. Both of those things are true. So rather than thinking about what do I say, what do I do, what is this person going to think of me, you think about that person. What have they said that sparks your curiosity, right? Come to every conversation in a curious frame of mind. Look for the thing that makes you go, I want to understand that better, or I want to know more about that. And start asking open-ended questions. What and how questions are the best ones. They get people talking, in a bigger way. Why also is pretty good, but sometimes it can be challenging. That's what we learn in coach training. But if you ask do or is questions, you can get a yes or a no and be done. Yeah. So use those what and how questions. Follow your curiosity, and you'll go down. Down a rabbit hole is usually a bad thing, but in this case, it'd be a great thing if you have a partner to do it with. Yeah. So you'll go hopping along together down this path that the other person really likes to talk about and you really want to know about. Like, it's a great combination.
Dale Carnegie wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's on my desk. It's a huge part of what I teach. And one of his quotes in the little golden book is make the conversation all about the other person. And when you think, and also he also create an eager want for them to share. That means ask good questions. And I wish I had my little golden book in front of me, because unlike my good buddy Nigel Alston, I don't remember every one of them. I specifically don't remember them in order, and he does. But that just anybody on the show, if you want the little golden book of these principles that Dale Carnegie published years ago, I'd be glad to send you a PDF copy. Just hit me up and ask me for it. Because if you just think about these little smile is another powerful way to get into a conversation, even if you're a little bit anxious. And so there's lots of little things you can do. There's another thing too and we've talked about a little bit, and I have it written on my desk for me to produce a video on this topic. Let me say, here, can you see that?
It's drudgery.
Because you have not practiced enough. And that's the same thing for our nerd friends. I'm uncomfortable having a conversation because I have not pressed myself to go have my first conversation, or my second, or my third, or my fourth. So practice is huge. I'm with you on that all about. So
Teddy, we're about halfway through our show today.
Yeah. So thanks for the reminder, Randy. I got away from time here. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm Teddy Burriss, my good friend Randy Wooden. You're at the Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, and our special guest today is Tracy Winter. And Tracy's helping us in a conversation about how people who identify as a nerd in lots of different ways can be better communicators and help them move along in their job search and their career transition. Buddy?
Hey, an observation, and again, I'm not a clinician and I don't profess to play one on TV, at least not yet, but my agents got some calls out, so there are people we'll get with my people. But
Nickelodeon, Randy, was that they call a Nickelodeon?
I think so, the Cartoon Channel, the Cartoon Network. I wrote a couple columns a few years ago on the strengths and weaknesses or the pros and cons of extrovert versus introvert. And one of the observations that I have made over the years, I think, and I just like your input on this, when it comes to interviewing, introverts can fear that because, oh no, I have to be on stage and I have to talk and all that. But and I'll count myself as the extrovert. I think extroverts too often feel like they can wing it based on their personality, that they can win someone over, that feeling comes out, that vibe that, hey, I want to be around this guy. This is a gregarious kind of guy. On the flip side, an introvert is likely perhaps to be more prepared, and they can take comfort in the fact that they have crossed the T's, dotted the I's. So they go in with all of the documentation. They are fully prepared, not trying to have to wing it. So I just thought, is that sort of kind of a reasonable assumption to make, a generalization? What do you think about that, Tracy?
Yeah, I haven't read any studies about that or anything, but I have seen it happen as well. Okay. And here's the thing, people who prefer extroversion, a lot of them, when they wing it, do really well, honestly. Like, you don't always have to practice. People who prefer extroversion can make those connections. Like I was talking about my sister earlier, she does a little bit of prep for interviews, but really she's just so approachable. On the other hand, she's also incredibly knowledgeable and has her the subject matter at her fingertips. So she's already got that practice, if you want to call it that, in her. But yeah, so and extroverts can also not know when to stop talking, right? That's sometimes an issue, right?
Don't laugh at me, buddy.
It can be. Hey, here is a tip if you think you might be a extrovert if you do these things. But yeah, if you talk too much, and again, like your thoughts on this in terms of reading body language and how we can hopefully adjust things. If we are talking too much, and I know we're talking nerd here for our topic today, but as an extrovert, if you see the person nodding their head, chances are that means that they follow your train of thought and they're not ready to interrupt you. But once they begin to make sounds, things like you better begin to conclude what you're going to say. And when they start to look at their watch, or more specifically, they say certain words. Okay, right. I understand. That makes sense. I'm with you. I got it. That's a stopping point. And if you continue like I'm doing now, and if you don't breathe like I'm also not doing now, and I continue to talk and ramble on and on
Randy,
and on.
Thanks a lot for sharing. That's what you're going to get.
I just talked myself out of the interview. Yeah. So there are pros and cons, introvert, extrovert. So we're, again, thankful to have Tracy on the show today. So Tracy, again, we're back now in the interview, and gosh, I've prepared. What about if I have to go into a panel discussion? And a lot more of that occurs whether online or face-to-face. And now it's not just one person, but now in front of an audience. Are there any different dynamics that come into play when you've got multiple interviewers staring at you all at the same time?
Can I real quick go back to what you were just talking about and then answer that question? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
So I will say cautionary for nerds. Sometimes because you're so good at picking things up, because you're so good at doing things the first time, because you know so much in other areas, you think you don't have to practice for interviewing. So there's that pitfall for a nerd is, if you're so smart, why can't you? Is something they hear in their brains a lot. So if you haven't recognized that you've got these tendencies, then That can be a pitfall. On the other side is also winging it because you're so used to doing everything well the first time. And this can be a different skill. The other thing I wanted to say about that, and then I'll go to panel, is this applies to the panel actually. If you get asked a question and you are an introvert type nerd, feel free to take a few seconds to organize your thoughts, right? A lot of us need to do that. We can't think on our feet and keep coming out with the right thing to say. So give it a second, let your brain, sort of put things in order, and then take a breath and start talking. Just taking that moment to be in your inner world for 5 seconds, it's not going to upset them, and you're going to come out and be very eloquent. And even if they were bothered, forget that you ever paused. For a panel interview, it's funny because I do pretty well in panel interviews. I've done it in the past, and I think it's because I was a competitive baton twirler. Because one of the scores on baton twirling competitions is eye contact. And I always got great scores on eye contact. So when you are interviewing with the panel, make sure you're not staring at one person, right? Make sure that you are, looking at different people at different times. If there are people who look encouraging, you can look at them for a longer time. Some people on a panel will smile, some people on a panel won't. So it's okay to spend time where it's a little bit more comfortable, but make sure you're hitting each of those things. And the person who asked the question, if different panelists are asking different questions, you definitely want to spend a little bit more time, a little more focus on them, right, as you're answering their question, because you'd assume that they were the one who came up with it. They're the one who are curious about it. So talk to them, but also be talking to everybody else at the same time. It's a skill. It's like an extra thing for your brain to have to do while you're scrambling in an interview. But lock that in as, okay, got panel interview, make sure I'm moving around.
Also, back on those cues where they say, right, sure, I got it, I understand, that kind of a thing. And extroverts sometimes can just keep talking beyond that, as I so eloquently displayed about 2 minutes ago. But I can tell you that in talking sometimes with introverts, when I'm speaking with them, they feel like very, very quickly that they have grasped the essence of what I'm going to say. And maybe 10 words into my eloquent answer, they say, right, sure. And I am so programmed that when I hear right, sure, I shut up. And I know they don't have the full thing because I know there's more to it. But for me to continue on is rude in their eyes. See where I'm going with that? And so I think we need to be, as the talker, we need to be aware that introvert is not being offensive when they cut you off with right, 10 words into it, but that's how their mind, the introvert's mind, thinks.
Well, this is interesting from a nerd perspective on both sides too, because nerds think they're going to get it like that because they often get it like that, right? So you as a nerd may start answering the question before they finish the question. Make sure you're using, your skills to listen first and then answer. If 90% of the time that you do get it right, there's a 10% of the time you don't, and you don't want that to be during an interview. On the other side of things, as an interviewer too, as a nerd, you're used to people not understanding. You're used to people not understanding your ideas, having to explain them multiple times, giving a lot of context so that people get it. You need to know all of these things first, and then here's my thing. And not everybody wants to listen to all that context. And this is one of the ways you can practice is get your answers down to as succinct as possible, right? Get them so that you're not saying anything you don't absolutely have to. If they want to know more, they'll ask you more. But that, when we don't give enough context as nerds, oftentimes we get that look of you've got two heads all of a sudden because your idea doesn't make any sense and it doesn't even exist in this world. Meanwhile, you're going, it totally makes sense. I have all the reasons it makes sense. Can I get them everything to you?
Well, I'm obviously a class A nerd because my wife never understands me. Randy?
Well,
not going to make any comments about that, I think.
Thank you, Tracy.
We get into interviews and unlike in everyday conversation, you will cut me off. Teddy does it all the time. I do it to him, and there's no offense meant. It's how we communicate in our culture. we've heard enough. And hey, let me tell you what happened with my Patriots. You know, they stunk this year, right? That kind of a thing. But you get into an interview situation and suddenly people don't interrupt you as much anymore. And you're nervous. You want to blah, 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 blah. And whether you're an introvert, extrovert, nerd, whatever, if you're not being interrupted, sometimes you feel like you've got to drone on and on and on. And so one thing I found, and again, I'd like your input on this, is if you feel like you're being, you know, kind of Edith Bunker, for those back in the day who remember on and on, why not ask a question? And say, much more went into that process or that project. Would you like more information, or is there anything else I can share with you? And that way it allows, first of all, it forces you to be quiet, and it allows the interviewer to redirect the conversation in a path that they want it to go versus you thinking how it should go. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Go ahead, Teddy.
I was going to add another perspective of that. I worked with this guy from Korea many years ago. And this is where I learned a skill that I think I'm doing good using this skill. The guy's name was Key. This guy was smart as a whip. He was a software developer. I mean, he could make software really do some cool stuff. He's efficient, he's fast, he's a fast coder. And often Key would try to tell me what he was doing and where he was taking this project. And I didn't understand it. And for two reasons. One was because of his accent, his Korean accent. And secondly is he's way up here, you know? And I would often say to him, Key, would you say that to me using different words? I repeat that, but using different words. And that made all the difference in the world. Then I started to really understand him better. And it really helped me also to begin to understand him and be able to listen better when he speaks and to be able to grasp his Korean accent. And he was no longer up here anymore to me. He was somewhere down here, but he's still above the gray line. But yeah.
And it's considering your audience, right? I go sometimes to the Society for Neuroscience conference every year, about 35,000 neuroscientists all in one city. It's nutty, talk about Nerd Central. And there are poster sessions. There's about 1,000 poster sessions every morning and then another set every evening for 5 days. And you go down and there's these grad students that are so excited about what they've done. And they're so in the middle of what they've done. And you say, can you explain this to me? Can you help me understand what you're looking at? And they use words that I do not understand because, again, social scientists, right? Yeah. And so I will stop them and say, can you explain it like you're explaining to your grandmother, please? And some of them can do it, and some of them have a challenge doing that. But right? So, you know, if you're a software developer and you're interviewing with other software developers, it's probably fine to talk up here. If you're interviewing with the hiring manager or the training manager that maybe doesn't have as much subject matter awareness as you do, think about who your audience is and how they can understand you best. Translate.
Yeah, and I know we're going to get bumped up on time here. It's coming up on quarter till. As long as it doesn't come across as condescending and that sort of thing, I totally get that. And I think that's an important factor to keep in mind, is to know your audience and to speak at the level that is reasonable. And I know I write columns in a newspaper, and I could bust open the thesaurus and sound like George Will or William F. Buckley, but to what end? You know, the audience comes first. So I do think it's important. And we've also approached topics about the introvert, extrovert, but let me pivot real quick. And then we're going to ask you to summarize for us. All right, let's say we're on the job. So we've talked a lot about the interview and so forth, but okay, I'm a nerd. And I still want to hear again the difference between a nerd and a geek, because I think I'm going to want to write that down.
I'll email you. You can send it out.
Please do. So fine. I'm in the job, but how can I leverage my nerdness in such a way as to flourish in my career?
You're already in the job.
Yeah, you're in the job. This is the other half of the viewers, the ones that have a job, say, look, man, I might be a nerd. How can I play well with others and really get my points across in a way that's effective?
I feel like a broken record because it's a combination of some of the things we've already said, right? Yeah. Don't condescend. That's a really good point, Randy. You don't want to condescend. On the other hand, being able to translate to an audience that doesn't have the technical knowledge, to me, demonstrates greater understanding in the first place. So when you're preparing to present a new idea, And it's a crazy idea because nerds mostly have crazy ideas. That's what everybody else calls them, right? Oh, that's a crazy idea. But hey, let's try it. To get the hey, let's try it, I'm going to say again, prepare, practice. What are the 3 things you want your people to know about this idea? What do you have to tell them to get them there? Why does it matter? But ask yourself some of these specific questions and find succinct answers for them. Because when you're excited about an idea and you want to go talk to somebody about it, you're going to go whoosh, and you're going to ideate all over them. Ideate at them, ideate all over them. It gets all messy and slimy. And yeah, exactly. Nobody really loves that, but they like to ideate with you, right? Yeah. So that's the other piece is prepare, have these succinct answers, but be open to somebody saying, that's really interesting. What if, right? Let yourself stay in that curious space that you stay in when you're having a conversation or you're doing an interview. Let yourself be open to what if from somebody else. So it's really easy to take ownership of our ideas and, you know, they're our darlings, right? But sometimes, you know, if you can collaborate, if you can, you know, respect other people and their ideas, and even maybe it's somebody who doesn't know as much as you do, but they could contribute something. There's a nugget. I don't think I've said anything groundbreaking today. I don't think I've said anything you couldn't find anywhere else. But maybe there's one nugget. That's what I hope for, is that you get one nugget out of today. And that's true for any conversation, any presentation like that, when you're trying to communicate your ideas. Can you get one nugget? Right.
You know, so Tracy, you may not have said anything that was phenomenally new, but the way you present can absolutely drop a nugget in somebody's mind.
I hope so. Thanks, Teddy.
Yeah. So, hey, so yeah, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff. I appreciate you sharing. Appreciate you bringing these ideas together. Randy, any other questions we got out there from the audience?
Yeah, just some random comments, I think, and so forth. So no, I think we're good to move into having Tracy do a nice kind of wrap up of takeaways that you'd like the audience to have.
So top one, I would say, stay curious. Use your strength as a nerd. As a nerd, most nerds that I know anyway, are really fascinated by lots of different things. They can find interest in so many different things. That will take you a long way in your interactions with other people, is being curious about them, being curious about their ideas, being curious about, you know, what they care about. So come with a curious mind to every conversation. Let's see what else. Practice. That was one of the things, right? If you're going to be creating, you know, presenting an idea like we were just talking about, if you're interviewing, if this is something that gives you anxiety, that makes your, you know, pulse race in not a good way, first of all, breathe. Second of all, practice. The more you do it, the more your brain will recognize that this is a normal thing, that this is an okay thing, and that it's not going to hurt, right? Even if it's hurt in the past, you can be successful in it now. Just let yourself be in safe spaces to start, and then gradually push yourself out there little by little as you get more and more comfortable. So that would be number 2. What else? When you are ready to speak, take a minute and get it in your head. Take that moment to be in your head, to get things in order. I think of it kind of like when I was in undergrad and I used to write an outline in the blue book. If you're very young, then forget this, but we used to have these things called blue books that you would actually handwrite an essay in. It was crazy. And so we used to outline in the blue book before you would start writing the essay. Do that in your head, right? Get your main points in your head, even if you've just been asked the question, and then answer the question cogently and succinctly. And also what Randy and Teddy were saying is pretty key, to look for those cues when you're done, when the other person is done, right? They're looking off to the side more. They're sighing. They're looking at the watch is a pretty, you know, obvious. Yeah, Randy's done talking. Randy's done listening to me, so I'm gonna be done now. But yeah, like, and sometimes they're subtle, right? But look for those. They may not come naturally, but those are some good tips.
That's good stuff. Good stuff, Tracy. Buddy?
Yeah, I'll make up a story.
I got a story, man.
I
always have a story.
I got one for you.
All right, you go first.
And it also ties into our next week's guest.
Yeah.
How's that for being totally creative and weaving this thing like I was meant to do it? So
you're trying hard, man. I'm proud of you.
Probably too hard. The word is diversity. Next week, we're going to have Stan Kimmer on. We're going to talk diversity in the workplace, what to look for. And Teddy's going to talk a little bit more about that before we wrap up. But diversity is not just age, not just race, gender, and all of the litany of the categories. It's also introvert, extrovert. It's analytical versus wing it. And so understand that you're part of that bigger mosaic out there. And companies need what I'll call the plotters, the thinkers, what I'll call the brainiacs. Okay. Then they also need the liberal arts guys like me, because it's the B students that run most of the companies out there, the B and C students. They're the business people, the schmoozers. They're the ones that can get out front, and then they rely on the nerds. And I've been in sales, and the short answer is, yeah, we can do it. And then I call Tracy and I go, Tracy, how are we going to do that? And that's where you come in. Let me throw out something else, and we've got still a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I was in a sales training for about a week in, where was that? Anyway, it was in Denver, a long time ago. And we were talking, this was not so much the product knowledge of how to sell the product, but how to sell in general. What are some things that we can be doing to increase our efficiency with that? And one of the things that the coach talked about was verbal cushions. And it's something that I've shared many times over the years. And a verbal cushion is something that you would typically say, or maybe something you could do, I guess. So that would be a nonverbal cushion. But it's something that shows respect for the question. It allows you time to think about what the heck you're going to say. And it also allows folks to drop their defenses. And so if I'm a nerd and I'm in the interview and I'm nervous and I get hit with a question that throws me, what do I do? What if you could cushion it by saying something like, well, if I'm in your shoes, I might have that same question. Let me address that. It's a conversational bridge that we can use, because part of this whole thing here, I think, is how do I sound conversational and engaging? And I'm not saying you have to be another Teddy Burriss. I mean, Teddy has it going on. He's not shy, but other people are. And so think of that in our everyday conversation. That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that before. Let me think about that for just a second. I think people can appreciate that. It helps to lessen the blow again, lets everybody kind of chill for a moment and lets you think about what you're going to say. And that may help frame your answer versus hitting the play button like a robot, okay? Because you know what the answer should be. Remember to be conversational, because hiring is competency and culture fit.
Yeah.
Got to know that the guy can do the job and the nerd can do the job, but culture fit. Do I feel good about this person? And part of that is that being conversational. So again, great topic today. Teddy, I know you've got a story to share and also talk about Stan for next week.
Yeah. So Tracy, you used the phrase, and I heard Randy use this phrase 4 or 5 times just now. As a nerd, I sometimes believe I know the freaking answer. I know how to solve this problem. I know how to make this right. And often I got to remind myself not to drop my bucket load of wisdom on the table, because that just, especially when someone else dropped their little thimble full of wisdom in my pea brain, and I'm being ridiculous to set up the stage for what I'm about ready to share. But instead of dropping my bucket load on the table, use the what if statement. As the nerd, if I've got another idea, which I think would be phenomenal, what I need to offer is, what if we took your idea and added this? What if we did this differently? The what if is a great way in the ideation conversation, the collaborative conversation, for not only others, but also us nerds, with the technical, whatever ideas that we think are fabulous, to share those. That's one piece that I think is really, I got from this conversation, and thank you for reminding me about that. Look, here's the other thing I wrote down when Tracy was talking. Celebrate your nerdness, celebrate your geekness, but make sure that you're celebrating the value it brings to the conversation. Don't just celebrate you are. Celebrate that you are doing. Celebrate that you're helping. And as a nerd, as an introvert, celebrate that you have a little bit. You tried a little bit. You asked a good question. Here's a good friend of mine. I spoke about him earlier. Nigel Alston and I were at an event one day. And Nigel was talking to this young man, and he was just asking questions. That's all he did was ask questions. At the end of the breakouts where we were asking each other questions, someone new we hadn't met, somebody asked this young man, what did you learn about Nigel? And the young man said, he's the greatest conversationalist I have ever met. Because all he did was ask questions. So if we are afraid of what we have to say, just start asking questions and listen to the answers and ask another relevant question. It can really take you out of that fear of networking, that fear of being out of place. Celebrate your crazy ideas, celebrate collaboration, celebrate ideation, and celebrate your curiosity. Again, as long as it takes us to another place and helps, the people we're trying to help, our community, our friends, our businesses. So Tracy, thank you very much for coming in here today.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I appreciated the opportunity to talk about this, and I hope I was helpful.
And we told you this wasn't going to be painful. Please tell me this wasn't painful.
This wasn't at all painful. It was delightful.
But Randy,
very easy. Thank you.
Would you say that again? It was what?
Delightful.
Oh, Lord.
Perfect.
There's your clip for your reel right there.
There you go.
Good stuff.
Hey, Teddy.
Yep. A few minutes. Randy, you got something?
Well, no, I was going to say I've had a kind of a long discussion with Stan, our guest for next week. So
why don't you introduce him?
Well, I wanted to work in a couple of points about it. And, diversity, equity, inclusion is certainly a big topic. And it's for a variety of reasons, it's front and center. And as a straight, white, Christian, conservative male, okay, the times when I have sat through DEI discussions, I often come out with the impression that I'm the guilty party. And it naturally puts me on the defensive. And Stan was the first person who delivered a business case for DE&I and didn't make me feel like I'm the bad guy. And because diversity includes people like me, I'm not the cause of everybody's problems. And so what a bit of a different twist. So having said that, something else, there were two other points that he's going to talk about that I thought were really, really cool for our audience. One is, okay, I'm a company. My company, we believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and so we give lip service to that. But what are some things that we can say and do during the interview and onboarding process to back up those thoughts? Yeah. So, walk the talk. And on the flip side, if you're a job hunter and for you, diversity is an important variable to consider, what are some words, actions, and clues that you can decipher throughout the interview process to see that this company is legit in how they're presenting themselves? They're not just making the talk. So it's, again, from both sides. And I thought that interesting. And he's also going to bring along some dollar sign stuff. So if you're a business leader, why is DEI important and how does it help your business? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's profitable and it's good all around. So I think we're going to really enjoy. And Stan, I said, Stan, is there anything we can't ask you? You don't want to go there. And he says, no, man. He said, the more controversial, the better. So if you have questions, comments, Stan's a great guy, and he's been doing this for a long time. So he's a nationally recognized expert in the field, and we certainly welcome him on next week's show. So I'll leave it with that, Teddy, and why don't you take it home? It's almost 1 o'clock.
Tracy, again, thank you very much. Randy, it was a pleasure hanging out with you again on Wednesday. This is our 41, Tracy? This is for show 41.
I think
41,
so.
and I'm a nerd, so I love that prime number.
Yeah, and so we're right around the corner from our anniversary show. And if anybody has an idea for an absolutely knockdown, fantastic, glorious special guest / conversation for our anniversary show, let us know. Randy and I are mulling over some ideas, and we're looking at, something a little bit bizarre. Might have something to do with a bull and an alligator. Who knows? But anyway, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you very much for showing up. We'll see you all again next week.
Take care. Have a good day.